Is it unmuted?
Well, welcome everyone. Doug, we finally got everything working.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, go
Excellent.
for it.
Okay. Do you want me to get going?
Yep,
Yep.
all
Okay.
yours.
Hello, everybody. I will be sharing my screen in a few minutes, so that will help show some of the maps that we came up with. So this is our fifth and hopefully final meeting of the Jackson Road Advisory Group. We have gone through a lot of information in the past 4 meetings that really began last spring and through the summer.
Oh, Doug, we should probably officially adopt the agenda
Oh, okay. Go
in
ahead.
the minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Will we adopt the agenda?
Second. Okay. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right. We have an extended group here.
Move approval of the minutes, the summary or synopsis of the minutes of April 17th, July 15th, and August 19th of 2024.
Support
There are no minutes here in the agenda.
he sent out a whole summary.
There was
It
a
was sent out a couple
packet
weeks
that was
ago,
on
yeah.
the website, but also
It's not on the website.
He sent it out by email.
Yeah, but not everybody
It's not.
here was part of that.
People on the committee were, though.
Yes.
Well, she's on the committee. I didn't receive anything, but it should have been in the agenda packet.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
Do you want me to forward it
to you? No, it's okay.
Okay.
I have photographic memory.
We need to make a note that, make a note that we need to add those to the agenda packet, Doug. For some reason, they didn't get uploaded.
Because I looked at this a couple of days ago and.
Yeah, it's there now. I noticed earlier today it wasn't on. I had Fran put it on, so it should be on right now.
You know what? It may be,
I just opened.
yeah, it is up. I just went on the website and it is up there.
Yeah, it was added.
Okay, maybe
it was
late.
added.
It's on the website?
It wasn't.
Yes.
Not saying I have a problem with this. This is what comes. So somebody's.
so people, so I just piggybacking on something you just
No,
said.
it just says
Jan,
possible
with the-
action.
Are only
and no
members of the committee?
attachment. Oh, wait a minute, here's something.
Yeah,
And who's the member?
Yeah, this is.
members of the committee are, raise your hand if you're a member of the committee. Kathy is,
I think
okay, yeah.
Go under B, it'll open up.
Committee of this committee.
Yeah, so it just didn't get linked with the,
Yeah, it's,
the agenda item that it's in the packet.
I looked at this a few days ago and it's even this.
Well, yours.
You see-
no,
Okay.
it wasn't there.
There's the.
Yeah,
This afternoon.
our packets are grow throughout the week. I've noticed on the planning commission,
Yes, they
even the
did.
night of, they grow.
Okay.
Hate to be such a stickler.
It's not gonna be there.
Vote rules and deadlines.
No, it's just possible action, yeah.
Running the meeting.
You are. Okay,
Imagine.
yeah, I mean, it's quasi, because we don't really have a chair, it's a really weird, yeah.
There's a lot of silence. I
Yeah.
just wondered what's going on.
We're looking at the.
They're looking at the minutes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. And we'll have to fix the links, I'll ask, Fran to fix the links so that. Okay. Thank you for doing the synopsis of the minutes too, Doug.
Pretty spot on.
Good to hear.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
That's where I got it, so I have no idea.
Okay. Did people find? Okay,
Call the question.
all right. We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as drafted. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved as drafted.
Okay.
Okay, now, public comment. Do we have any public? Other than we do have people here. We do not have anybody online. That open, somebody pops up. Yeah. All right. All right. Yes. Oh, D one for Doug. All right, we're to D for Doug.
All right, sounds like my college career, D for Doug. Kidding. So, a couple of things I wanted to talk about tonight or this afternoon was doing a little analysis of some of the either vacant, what I call vacant or underutilized properties within the Jackson Road corridor. And then applying one, just kind of identifying their location, because a lot of what we're talking about along the Jackson Road corridor are development possibilities. And so if there's existing buildings and businesses that are successful and ongoing concern, those of course weren't listed, but I went through the entire corridor, north side and the south side, and tried to identify properties that seemed to me were either vacant by visually vacant through the aerial photograph, or just properties that don't seem to be that could be further developed. I listed those. And I'll share my screen in a minute so you can have these. I just want to kind of give you an overview. And then after I kind of identified those on a map, I listed them all in a couple of tables showing acreages, and then took those totals and put them into zoning categories, and then applied some development kind of rules of thumb with regard to how much of the property could be developed. And I'll get into that in more detail as we go to this. And then took that number and multiplied it by the Ann Arbor Table A numbers for sewer capacity. And I thought that would be a good exercise to try to determine or try to get a good example of, if properties are developed in a certain way, either as zoned or maybe not as zoned, how much capacity do we have left in the sewer service district, based on estimates that we've been given by OHM. And this is not exact, it's not an exact science by any means. However, it gives you a good feel for how certain kinds of development, certain different kinds of development impact the capacity that we have left within the corridor. And that has been, and the reason I went into this kind of detail is, pretty much the previous 4 meetings, there has been a discussion topic of this, this issue is why are, how much development, what should we even be looking at? Should we be looking at developments that could blow us past our current capacity, or should we be within that capacity or under the capacity? And how do we control that? And so since that, we always seem to come back to that discussion in our previous meetings, I wanted to give a little bit more specifics than us just kind of ballparking. So I took those properties, identified 15 of them, about 203 acres that I'm calling underdeveloped property, applied all of those things, and then did some analysis about what, how many REUs those kinds of development would take. And as you can imagine, the results are any kind of residential development is much, much greater than the underlying, office, commercial, and industrial. So don't mean to jump ahead and spoil the ending of the story, but that's kind of the ending of the story. Let me share my screen here if I can. And this will help a little bit. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
I can see it. I don't know that I can read it.
Well, you don't need to read this part. Let me just scroll through this and I'll get to, this is the
This is
part.
part
that
of
I
what you
just
already
did.
gave us.
Yeah.
And I'll zoom in on this a bit also. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
I'll zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, so these are the properties that I identified within the corridor that completely subjectively selected by me that I thought were either vacant or underutilized. Now, these were obvious vacant or underutilized properties. There are of course others, and there are properties that are currently being used that certainly could be bought by a developer, and whatever's there could be torn down. That just like happened with the old the suburban Lithia auto dealership. There was a residential subdivision at Delhi and Jackson, and the developer bought all those houses and tore them down. And there was an old industrial facility, the old American Brooch building that was on that property. They bought that building and tore that down. So, I mean, a dedicated and, a developer, someone who wants to get something done in a certain location, if they spend enough money, they'll be able to do it. But this list represents those properties that are obvious, they're not the ones that you'd have to kind of say, well, maybe someone could buy this and tear it down and start over. These are the ones that are, in my opinion, were obvious properties within the corridor that could be subject to development. And here, this is the list. So I've got 1 through 15 here. And they go on both sides of Jackson Road. We've got, I'll show you the map here in a moment, but we've got the Quality 16 site, which the township is currently talking about. Got a vacant auto mall site. The Alpha House site, which I believe is being discussed, is also the big chunk of that is vacant. There's some vacant property behind the U of M Credit Union that's underutilized. There are some other properties that are underutilized. The Tarumo site on the north side of Jackson, which is Tarumo Hart, big employer within the township, has almost 16 acres of vacant property behind it. A little Scio Township trivia. At one time, the Tarumo Hart had a small, I think 3 or 4 golf holes back there. The owner loved to play golf, and there was actually several golf holes. Those have been overgrown for a number of years, but there was a little private golf course back there. And there's others, and some of these are just vacant with various land use designations. There are, in addition to the Menards property that is likely going to be developed in a multifamily configuration, there's other properties. There's over 20 acres of other Menards outlots that are vacant, and some others. And so if you look at some of the analysis on this, most of the property that's vacant is industrial because that's just traditionally what a lot of the Jackson Road corridor was zoned and planned for, was office industrial. And C2 and C3 make up some of it, PUD a little less, and then recreation conservation and office service, even a smaller percentage of those that identified as vacant. We scroll up here. I then converted all of those individual properties, lumped them into zoning districts. And so you look at all the different zoning districts. These are the acreages associated with them and the percentages. As I mentioned, as we've found out with the quality 16 site, that anything that is currently zone PUD, which right now we have 23.4 acres that I'm identifying as underdeveloped. While those are underdeveloped, they can have difficulties redeveloping because a PUD really restricts what can happen on the property. And so a developer has to go back through a PUD process. It's not easy to do. And PUDs are a great tool to allow something to happen on a piece of property that you might not normally get. But once they're approved, they become difficult to change. And so while there is some vacant property, the applicant or a developer in those cases would have to jump through pretty significant hoops. It can be done, obviously it can be done, but it's not necessarily easy. So then moving along into this discussion of sewer impacts of the various land uses, I've got some analysis here. If all of the properties that I show here were developed, all these vacant properties were developed under their current zoning or land use, I calculated that all of those properties, those vacant properties, would use about 216 RUs. So that's significantly less than what we have available to us that has been reported, on numerous occasions by OHM. So as zoned, we've got, again, this is oversimplification, but we have plenty of sewer capacity within the Jackson Road corridor as currently zoned.
So Doug,
Yeah.
can I,
16 and.
so I'm just trying to understand your last comment compared to your table 3, where you say residential would use about 520 RUs.
Gallons per day is the other.
Yeah, let me get to that table here in a moment.
Yeah.
I might be misunderstanding you. Say that if we utilized all these 15 properties, we would use 260 16 RUs, but then you.
Yep, so again, that's as currently zoned commercial office industrial.
Oh,
This
not
is
all
all
residential.
not all
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. So if those vacant properties, assuming my analysis is, correct or even close to being correct about these underutilized properties, 203 acres underutilized properties based on the Ann Arbor Table A, quantities of RUs per use, I calculate about, as I said, about 216 RUs as currently zoned. So as zoned, we're good, at least in my planning analysis. So if you take all of those land uses that I had shown, and you let's say 30% of those vacant properties are going to be used for multifamily, because the reason I'm talking about multifamily or residential is because we have that's been a big part of our discussion during these previous 4 meetings is introducing the possibility of additional residential development along the Jackson corridor has been kind of a continual theme of our meetings. And so if we were to take 30% of the underutilized property, leaving 70 in its current zoning. And then apply a number of units. Now that, this number of units is higher than what we allow in our current zoning ordinance. However, the quality 16 redevelopment has been using a number of 25 units per acre, and that's a number per acre that they believe they can make a multifamily project work within the Jackson corridor, and one that I believe, and someone on the Township Board or Planning Commission, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a number that the township has generally found acceptable. It's 25 units per acre. So using that number that has
Thereabouts.
been, yes,
I was just gonna say that project today conceptually is about 230, maybe a little less.
Total, so it's less than that, the
Okay.
the current kind of scheme that they presented.
okay. So then you'll have to, that this number I'm going to tell you could go up or down a little bit depending on the density. So this is kind of one of those cases where it's like a dial on a radio. You turn it up, you turn it down, and then these numbers are all going to change a little bit. But I use 25 because that's a number that had been kind of thrown around at the quality 16. So if we use 25 units per acre, this would bring about 1,525 possible units within this area that I've identified as underdeveloped sites. And then you multiply that by the gallons per unit based on the Ann Arbor Table A for just 30% of the developable land. And that gets us to under that density, 25 per acre, that would get us to 1,270 REUs. And the number that we've been told, a number of times is about 1,200 REUs that are available within the corridor. So as you can see, even just 30% of the current Jackson Road corridor developed in a residential manner at 25 units per acre puts us over what has been reported as our maximum REUs. Now, if we were to drop the 25 units per acre to 20 or to 15 or to 10, of course, this 1,270 REU number is going to go down. It's still going to be significantly, higher than what it could be developed with the underlying zoning. So another way to look at this is if you just take a 25 acre development. So you could apply this to any 25 acres within the corridor. This wouldn't necessarily have to do with my kind of subjective picking out of these 15 properties. This could be any 25 acre development developed in 4 different ways: multifamily, commercial, industrial, or office. And this is the table 3 that I think Kim was referencing. So this is for a 25 acre development. And again, I use the 25 units per acre. This would be less, of course, if it was 15 or whatever the number would happen to be, which we could easily calculate. But as you see here, at this rate, if you look at the potential for development between residential, commercial, industrial, and office, the REUs that are used for that would be, required, that, OHM would do an analysis, and I think my numbers are correct. I'm pretty sure they are, but OHM would come back and say, these are the numbers that a 25 acre commercial development or 25 acre industrial development or 25 acre office development. These are the numbers that we would need to support those acreages. And this is the number we need to support a residential. So, and there was, there's some factors here that I used with the Ann Arbor Table A. And this 20%, by the way, this is kind of a planning rule of thumb that, I've been using for many, many years. And basically what that is if you have a piece of property, whether it's 1 acre or 5 acres or 20 acres, typically you can assume that 20% of that property is available for development, and like actual buildings, because the rest of it is going to be, sorry about that. The rest of that is going to be, stormwater detention and parking and landscaping and buffering and all that sort of thing. So this is that's where the 20% comes from, and it's just kind of a rule of thumb. And just in my experience over the years, surprisingly, that number works really well, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So the upshot of this analysis, and then I'll stop talking for a minute, is that kind of, we had, and I'll show you the maps here in a minute also, we had talked about early on, there was discussion about allowing some high density residential or single family residential along the corridor, maybe as just a permitted use, to not make it difficult for a piece of property to develop, because there was some desire that maybe we could, create these nodes and have this residential component to the Jackson corridor. And I think the thinking that, at least my impression of the thinking, was that no, we probably should keep the introduction of high density residential as a PUD, and that because that would allow, one, it would allow it to happen in certain circumstances under conditions that were favorable to Scio Township, but because PUDs are the most discretionary process that we have, it allows a high level of review from the township and the ability to say no. Where if it's a use permitted by right, essentially, if they meet the minimum standards, it becomes difficult to say no. So keeping it as a PUD, that's kind of the final analysis here, is that it kind of makes a lot of sense. The properties themselves, this is the by the way, just if you've never seen it, this is the Ann Arbor Table A that OHM always references when they talk about capacity in the sewer district. And this gives, pretty much every land use, and then it applies a per gallon per unit to get up to what is, REU, as we all know, stands for residential equivalency unit, and that's about 300 gallons per day. So anything, that gets you to 300 gallons per day is considered one REU. Less than that, it's a half an REU. If it's, 150 gallons, it's a half an REU. With 600 gallons, it's two REUs. So that's kind of how that works, and I'm sure y'all realize that. So this is the map, just so you know. I'll just talk for just a couple more seconds here. Oops, maybe not. Let me go back here, see if I can zoom in on this. No, these are the areas. I don't know if you can see these or see this very, very closely or carefully, but these are the, you should have this in your packet. These are the properties that correspond to the to that first table. And so this is the Goodrich Theater site. This is the Auto Mall site. Yeah, so that I assume you've gotten these, and this is just, and then I also, on these maps, just to point out, I also added wetland locations so that you could see that maybe some of the properties, although vacant, might have some developmental constraints, which kind of falls into that 20% thing I talked about. So that's what this is. So these are all the areas identified, and we can go back to those if you'd like, but I just wanted to show you how I kind of came up with this, with these numbers, with these properties. So they're all identified by numbers in those little blue circles here. So that is what I've got with this part. And really, I wanted to provide this information as a is kind of a backdrop on the whole REU issue. And, you know, kind of throw in there that it's even clearer to me that we should leave, you know, this kind of higher density residential as only being permitted as part of the PUD. But that ultimately will be, you know, the planning commission's call when they get to actually adopting the ordinance. But I guess I'd like to hear from you guys to see what you think about that. So before I go on any further, any thoughts, comments on this first part?
Yeah, Kathy has a question for you.
I have a question, Doug. You've accounted for property in the Jackson Road overlay district. But what about additional property in our sewer district that isn't in the Jackson Road overlay district?
Like that might, are you?
Okay, I'm just saying, though, we would probably need some of that information too, like how many parcels are there that are out there that are still in the sewer district that aren't developed, or, I mean, it just seems like there's more information that we need to draw very many conclusions from this.
Yeah, I mean, there is additional acreage that could draw REUs. Is that what you're, is that?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm wondering, in the southeastern corner of the township, how much of that is in the sewer district and not developed at this time?
If you give me a minute.
I get it.
could- well,
Because I mean, it's a factor, we don't have to, I mean,
Well, one of the things
Yeah,
you could say is, you could say, could we update this to include the properties that are in the sewer district, so it's a comprehensive
yes, yes,
chart of,
yeah.
and that would be more, that would be more useful as, because we have to look at all of the property that could be tied into the sewer. It would be good to,
Yeah, it would still be good to have it.
yeah, then it's comprehensive
Yeah.
and easier to.
You know what you have to negotiate with Ann Arbor.
Well, it gives, it informs if we want to do any changes of the zoning or those types of things. But yeah, I think it definitely supports the whole idea of maintaining multifamily in a PUD. So you have the ability to say yes or no based on sewer capacity, but also the other thing I was thinking, and Doug, has anyone ever, I mean, how would the planning commission and the board of trustees sort of maybe rank where preferred multifamily sites would be? Because if we only have in the short term, you know, we have to manage these. Is that ever done? And, you know, to say, these are our priority sites or priority areas for where we would want multifamily. So it's I'm thinking about, okay, if somebody puts multifamily maybe further out where we may not want it, you know, you want it close to Jackson Road, closer to, you know, creating that walkable, bikeable, connected community. You know, it would give us more of a basis for saying no to somebody. Even if it's a PUD, you have a right to say no, but you know, we know they end up in the court too.
Yeah. Well, good, yeah, you know, good question. And so the short answer is the current township master plan is supposed to show where, you know, various densities of residential are anticipated. And you know, the master plan does show where some high density residential is anticipated. But and the Jackson Hole corridor indicates that multifamily is a use that could be located within the Jackson Hole corridor. Have we gotten specific on where within the corridor? No, that is not That is not in the current master plan. And there's been no study or analysis that I know of that has specifically tried to identify spot, whether that's at Wagner, Zeeb, or Baker, or whatever, wherever those happen to be. But no, not that I'm aware of.
And I also want to just, as a time, piece, we have several people that need to leave at 5, so,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
okay,
All right.
including me, but I'll turn it over to.
What is the master plan do for renewing? It's every 5 years, right?
Well, you must review it every 5 years. You can update it whenever.
Right, we could do it this term.
So just usually they update it when or they review it when it's time to update?
Yeah, it's required by legislation, right, Doug, to review. You don't have to update it, you just have to review it every 5 years. But you can update it at any point in time.
And when did we review it last? Was it 2020?
It was 21, I think, was
I
was
think
Yeah,
21. was when it was
2021.
approved.
Yeah,
So 26.
2021. Yeah, so 26, the township will, according to Public Act 33, which is the Planning Enabling Act, that all communities are supposed to at least look at their master plan every 5 years. You don't have to amend it, but you at least have to look at it. And you can do one of 3 things. You can say, good, yep, it's good the way it is, no change. And then you're good for another 5 years legally. Then your master plan can't be challenged. You could say, there's a couple tweaks we want to make. Most of the master plan is good, but we're going to do a couple sub areas or a couple targeted location changes. And then you go through the process, leave most of the plan the way it is, but make a few minor changes. Or you can just basically say, we're starting over. And that would be like the nuclear option of just kind of starting from scratch. So there's kind of 3 different ways at that 5-year period. I've seen communities do all 3. They might look at their master plan and say, you know what, this still represents what we think the township residents want. And we are going to just maintain it for another 5 years. Or, you do one of those other options. And as Jan said, a community, you're not bound by 5 years. I mean, you can update the master plan every year if you want. But most communities don't do that because it can get a little expensive.
Well, maybe next year we could begin because the state is, what was it? They just changed something or is mandating that master plans have housing included.
Oh, yeah.
And we're talking about the Jackson Road corridor and more housing. So maybe that would be the perfect time. We can get a better idea. And by that time, the
Corridor study.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, and we should probably, it would be good, I think, to do some sort of community engagement around housing. I think that, and really look at, because we do have, now we have some more additional rentals, but kind of have somebody look at, the housing availability and how we meet that legislation, and just talk about the purpose of the legislation and how communities can engage around having that full range of housing options. Because that would be a good point, from an education foundation. Okay.
So
And
I
that's
just put up on the screen based on Kathy's comment. This is the current sewer service area. And so Kathy, you were interested in this area down here in the southeast, you said?
Well, I just asked about that
Yeah.
area, but is
Yeah.
that the only area that?
I think it goes to Liberty on Wagner Road. Yeah.
Okay.
But she's looking for undeveloped properties in that lower.
Oh,
So what we didn't capture in that was Crossroads, right?
Yeah, which is right here.
Okay.
And then this is the Smith's property, which is now developed. This is the U of M Woods, which is in the sewer district, oddly, but it is. So yeah, no, but we didn't look outside, obviously I tried to concentrate our efforts in the Jackson
Yeah.
corridor area, but
And the
it's a
Gelman.
good point. I mean, yeah.
And the Gelman property can't have residential on it. That, I think we found that out with, they have what was that called?
Restrictive covenant.
Yeah, the restrictive covenant,
Smiths.
yeah. On the Gelman property, so that can't have, well, they said, did it say all residential or single family? I think it said residential.
But you can have a playground.
Yeah.
In the church.
Yeah,
You can have families.
you can have families, but not housing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it wouldn't be too hard to just update that. I think that would be a good idea, then we can have that as a resource.
Okay. Okay, and real quick before, so that was kind of the analysis of the, let me stop my share here. Of the of the implications of various kind of land uses for sewer capacity. So really the big issue there is that multifamily and residential uses a lot more than office, industrial, or commercial. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is what will be submitted to the Planning Commission, is the bullet points that are on the second page of my memo. And I might be able to pull those up here also, real quick, if I can. And those are kind of what I gleaned from my notes that I think would end up going to the Planning Commission for for their use in their beginning to look at the updating of this ordinance. And let me find that real quick. Keep scrolling. I'm going to share that. I'm going to share my screen one more time.
Doug, while you're doing that 1,270 RUs, is that the total, including the 30% being high density residential, or is that just for the high density residential? I wasn't sure what you were saying. 1,270, the total?
Yeah, I think that's with the residential.
Right.
That'd be with the residential.
Okay, 1,270 is the total.
I thought you said that was 30% of Jackson Road.
Yeah, yeah, I was a little confused, but 1,270 is either the total or it's the residential that's 30%.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, it says bring us a total REU for just 30% of the building. Land identified above Act 1270.
So that's not the total.
No, that's just,
It's not.
Okay.
that's just the emphasis that residential.
Would be a portion of that,
Okay. I'm sorry.
30%.
That was the 30% that's residential is at 1,270. If you add industrial, commercial, and office, it would be greater than 1,270.
But that number isn't in the report.
No, it's.
I can clarify that. I did this a while ago and I kind of get a little mixed up here. I'll try to clarify that. And get email it. I guess the point is that it's a pretty significant increase when you go to residential.
Yeah.
So here are the bullet points that I kind of, as I said, gleaned from all of my information from the last 4 meetings, and that's that we'd be passing on to the Planning Commission. The first is what we were just talking about, and that's that sanitary sewer capacity must be considered for any new development. That's maybe obvious, but I think it's definitely something we have to say. PUD is currently the only way to develop high density residential within the district, and due to the sewer capacity constraints, that should continue to happen. And I haven't heard anyone today say that that's not what should happen. So I put that in your bullet point. Higher density residential should be exclusive to the Jackson Road corridor. Rural areas outside the corridor should be left rural. I know we had several discussions about that point to make sure that these ideas wouldn't bleed out into, the northern or southern parts of the township. And so I wanted to make sure that was clear. And then we did have some discussions about building heights, and that there likely will have to be some flexibility in building heights if we're going to have higher density residential development. And that would be over 2 stories. And there was some back and forth on this point, so maybe we can talk about that in a second. And then we talked about some geographic areas that could be maybe more appropriate than others for some more intense development, particularly maybe some residential development. And those would be kind of the traditional Wagner, Zeeb, and Baker areas, where if you think about it right now, we have, Baker is where the big residential development's going on right now, the big multifamily. And sort of near Wagner is where the Quality 16 is, a little further west than that, but close enough. And Zeeb, I think there's been some discussions about some stuff happening at Zeeb. So this is, these are some nodes that we could look at, and of course the planning commission could refine that. Now, motorized should be, considered regardless of where the development is or the type of development. We talked about form-based codes early on, and form over use, which is really what a form-based code is, where the buildings they look a certain way, they're designed a certain way. We're not necessarily as concerned if it's a restaurant and a dentist's office and an industrial building, which current zoning is. You can't, if it's zoned office, you can't have a restaurant, and if it's zoned commercial, you can't have a light industrial facility or whatever, you name the mix. But form over use means that we would be more flexible with these uses. The current Jackson Road Overlay District is pretty flexible, but it certainly could be adjusted to be a little bit more flexible, to be more concerned with form over use. Now, this was a discussion we had also that kind of hit late in the process, and that was potentially prohibiting certain uses within the corridor. The two that stuck out to me in my notes were auto dealerships and perhaps drive-through type businesses, drive-through restaurants. So,
Orange.
yeah.
You can tell we've been involved in these discussions for a while.
Yeah, let me know if there's others, that we can pass on to the
Yeah,
planning commission.
Oh, yeah.
And
Did we agree on the drive-through restaurants?
No, we didn't agree that, look at them, and there may be certain areas within the corridor that they would be okay, and certain areas. Thinking of, obviously, we're close to the
Freeway
state
interchange.
changes,
I think
but
we
in the
agree.
middle of the corridor, maybe that doesn't make as much sense.
These are like part and parcel of discussions we've been having in the last couple of years as part of the planning commission.
Yeah, so you'd have it. And one thing, it's kind of interesting, I don't know if anyone's following what Ann Arbor's doing with their comprehensive plan, but and I would not, it's not, a lot of it isn't suitable for here, but they're reducing the number of zoning districts, so they're having, I'm just thinking, we keep coming up like, the outdoor recreation folks. Should, recreation and outdoor recreation be allowed, anywhere in the Jackson Road corridor? Are there certain things, rather than having, this parcel is is it I1, this one's a C2, this one's a C4, this one's whatever, you sort of decide what uses make sense there, and like the form-based code gives you where they can be, what kind of buffers and all that, and then have at it, if it works from a market standpoint, and except for the multifamily, which would really draw the REUs, you know, maybe it frees up and makes things more flexible within that corridor. So that was sort of my thinking.
And to support the families that are living there, what would they need?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've gotta get fly too, but anyway, that was kind of my thinking is, how do we make it more flexible? And not get so many, like, you know, the university flower shop had to come in and get a conditional use for 10% retail. And, you know, that just doesn't make sense when we're trying to make a really nice mixed use corridor. And yeah, we should identify the ones that you want to have as conditional uses that, you know, you want to kind of weigh in on, but, you know, you could I think you could make it more general than, you know, all the little spot zones. And I have to go too, but, yeah, and I want to make sure this will get transmitted into that, the SEMCOG grant project that we're doing, and then hopefully the planning commission can, you know, pull all of those things together with the board of trustees and, you know, really take a look at how we can, you know, really activate and connect the Jackson Road corridor, so it becomes a desirable, more desirable place to be and live and work and play and all those things. These are your glasses. Thank you. I'll need those.
So that's all I've got, and I would propose that, you know, we would send this packet to the planning commission that I put together here. And if there's I'll just open it back up to any other comments or thoughts, and if there aren't any, then I guess we can wrap it up. But if there are, we can add those to whatever we pass on to the planning commission at this point.
I would just say that we're gonna be looking, Jan, for the study along Jackson Road to give us ideas about pedestrian, crosswalks, bike lanes, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And hopefully, I mean, when we talk mixed use, the idea of the residential and the commercial together, instead of like the motor raceway on Jackson Road was all commercial. And then secondarily, cafes, different kind of commercial that would be supported by more residential.
Yeah, more placemaking things, you know, so that's why, you know, the whole idea of limiting where the drive-throughs are, so that you know, build these nodes that are placemaking, draw people in, people can bike, people can walk, that it's associated with the multifamily and public transit.
One thing that seems not to be mentioned or is omitted, and maybe it's, this is my first meeting you've had for, I admit that. Green space. Because if you want to attract people, you want more than just concrete and bricks.
We have the islands.
The way station, yeah.
Your point
you're
was
right.
not lost on me. And as a matter of fact, there was 3 acres adjacent to the Lithia project that was supposed to be green space. Then it, as I understand it, it got nixed at the DOT level, but
What?
no, maybe it was the,
No,
no,
they wanted
it
to
was
make
the
a.
DDA. They didn't think that park needed to be on Jackson Road.
Yeah, well.
Because it was about who was gonna care for it.
Yeah, who is gonna care for all?
But it can be,
Looking at this.
Andrea?
No, it's a good
it
point.
could be green space, it could be public spaces, you know, placemaking, places where people can gather, you know, that.
You need more than a bench. I mean,
Exactly.
you need it to look, and concrete and bricks. Don't look.
They'll look nice. And they increase temperatures too.
Yes, well, if you want to attract people, you gotta make it attractive.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Lithia is gonna come out with the kind of how they've done the pathways and the landscaping and so forth, just to see, yeah.
I mean, Alpha House is underutilized. To me, it's perfectly utilized because it's for families and there's a lot of trees and privacy. I mean, that's perfectly utilized. No offense, Doug, but I think it's perfectly utilized.
And also, but also being able to connect people with those places that are also adjacent. And that's, I mean, in our big barrier, I don't know, hopefully we'll come up with something that people can get behind for connecting, the zebra pathway. Because I think that would be a real helpful connection. And then, but I agree, you need to, with those nodes, also need to be public spaces, placemaking, connection to, you know, the natural environment.
All right, I don't think we need any action at this point. But I do see that there is one member, there is someone who joined the meeting, Rob Pattinson.
Oh,
And
that
I,
they want to comment, yeah.
Public comment.
Public comment, we'll open that when we close
So-
everything up, thank you.
I don't know how to do, I'm not taking responsibility for that system. I don't know anything about that.
I don't either.
There's a new one.
Well, yeah, we just have to make sure the,
Of .gov
There's a new
access.
one.
there, when we,
I'm not either.
who knows how to close down the,
Well,
does anyone know how to
Turn
close
off the
down?
computer. No, I don't.
I have purposely not encouraged the email.
Okay.
I can't.
I mean, I could probably shut down the
Okay,
Okay,
laptop.
anyway, I'll give Rob,
No.
you wanna contribute, I'll just allow you to talk and then you can do public comment. You just, this is the, power down button right here, right-hand corner. And you turn off the computer.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
So I would like to say, I appreciate your packet today, Doug. I thought it helped us move beyond conceptual, even though we're still conceiving of it, but it put some meat on the bones for folks, so thank you.
you're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Doug.
Public comment. Nobody's here. Rob Patterson?
Hi, gang. I don't need to make a public comment. I apologize for being late. What I did see in the last half hour was that you guys are really digging into the details now, and I think that is fantastic progress. So well done, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Any other people in the stratosphere on the screen?
And thank you, Doug, for letting
Thanks,
him know.
Rob. All right, move to
Move to
adjourn.
adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye. Oppose. I want to say no.
See you, Bob,
Then,
or Rob.
And your little friend Bob.
Take care, gang.
All right, take care.
All right, see you guys. I gotta connect back at 7 for the zoning board of appeals. So we'll
oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
have a good dinner.
all right, yeah, we'll see you.
I need to look to see when I text you. You know, please, because,
Because I didn't get a confirmation now.
So are you gonna do that?
Bob, are you on the CPA?
Yeah.
I think Peppy is.
Is that